Hello, I'm Subby, I got a hold of you. This week, I wanted to do something a little different. Lord of the Rings, The Rings of Power came out beginning of September. It just wrapped up its first season. I have watched the entire thing. What are my thoughts on it? Well, let's not bury the lead. Is it the worst show ever? Not by a mile. It's not the worst show I've ever seen. Is it a great show? I wouldn't go that far. The biggest thing this show gets wrong, in my opinion, is that it is too slow, not much happens. In some portions, it is very poorly casted, and it relies a lot on people having an investment in the movies and to some extent the novels, but much more so this is geared towards people who liked the movies, but it doesn't do anything to make those people want to like this show. If anything, it spits in the face of a lot of those people, specifically the book readers. I mean, I have not read the books. Let me qualify this. So my history with the entire Lord of the Rings series is I knew nothing of it other than it looked like huge ass nerd shit growing up. And then I saw the movies my sophomore year in high school. We actually had a field trip to go see Fellowship the day it came out. And this was the same year that the first Harry Potter movie came out, which I also didn't read. And I enjoyed that. I thought it was okay. And then seeing the Lord of the Rings, like, oh god, I sat through Harry Potter. How am I going to sit through this? Loved it. Sean Bean at the time, who was not my most favorite obscure actor, but still a guy I really enjoyed from GoldenEye, really solidified my liking of him. Of course, he dies in it. Gandalf's great. Like, the whole movie's great. And of course, from there, I was hooked. After that, I played some of the video games in the mid-2000s. I played a lot of Lord of the Rings Return of the King on the GameCube with my dad. And then, of course, Shadows of War, Shadows of Mordor, I was heavily into, which is the series that introduced me to Celebrimbor. Because before that, I knew nothing of the extended universe of Lord of the Rings, and Celebrimbor was a badass in that, and is the guy who forged the ring, so that's one of the things I was looking forward to, be like, oh cool, Celebrimbor is going to be in this. And yes, I saw the Hobbit movies, which I gotta admit, I was not a big fan of, especially because I saw the first one in the XD mode, where it had that weird frame rate, and just didn't look right, and yeah, they stretched out one book to 3 movies. Okay, alright, that's a little much. Anyways, enough exposition. Let's talk about the series. So, the main issue is, like I said, not much happens. You can sum up, and there's going to be major spoilers all throughout this. So if you haven't seen The Rings of Power, then stop here, because I'm going to just, like I said, I'm not going to bury the lead here. So, first and foremost, they made Galadriel the main character, which, by all means, people know who Galadriel is. She's the ephemeral witch character, super cool from the movies. They found an actress that looks a lot like Cate Blanchett. Fortunately, that's kind of where the similarities end. Morfydd Clark is Galadriel, which people call Guy-Ladriel. I'm not going to call her Guy-Ladriel, but yes, Galadriel. I'm more likely to call her Karen Ladriel. Like, she's just, I don't know what it is. She's very unlikable in the role.
But you have not seen what I've seen.
I have seen my share.
You have not seen what I have seen.
And they don't do her any favors. They start off the first episode. She's the commander of the Northern armies, but is willing to let her men just die in the ice.
Wait, no! We keep moving!
She's punching through ice walls. She's becoming CSI Galadriel. She is saying ridiculous lines like, this place is so evil. Heat does not happen here.
My hand is past feeling.
No. This place is so evil, our torches give off no warmth.
The worst part is they have her one-shot an ice troll by herself, and her second in command, when they're seeing that there's an ice troll over there, what does he do? Turns around, drops his sword as if it's something they've practiced, and she jumps up, does these flips, and this takes out an ice troll that, in Fellowship, literally required the entire Fellowship to barely survive, and in the process, Frodo got skewered, if not for the Mithril. So already, they're setting up too high. You never hear about her husband Celeborn, except for in one episode. She's out for revenge to hunt down Sauron, who killed her brother, and that's essentially her whole motivation. And after this, she finds that, oh, Sauron in this ice thing is still around, and they go back to where Gil-galad and Elrond, which another... This is not Elrond. I'm sorry. You cannot take Hugo Weaving and then cast this guy who looks like he's MacGyver's poor stepbrother. Like, it just didn't work. I don't know. I don't know, like the badassery they're trying to put in Galadriel, they at least should have put a modicum of that onto Elrond, because the whole time, he just, And what is with the elves having short hair? Like, one of the things about the original Lord of the Rings is the elves had an ephemeral quality where they were almost angelic at times, and these elves, other than the ears, I couldn't tell you they were any different than the human characters. Not at all. Like, there really wasn't much difference between the humans and the elves, and the only reason the dwarves were any different, or the Harfoots, which we'll get to, is because they're littler. First episode, you're introduced to Galadriel with all this craziness and the one-shotting of the ice troll. There's she wants to get Sauron, wants to go back out, been hunting him for hundreds of years, can't find him, so they want to get her out of there. They want to send her off to Valinor, which is the Undying Lands where the elves are from. So that's their grand scheme, which already you're seeing a Elrond and a Gil-galad that are duplicitous, trying to essentially, they both think that Galadriel's right, that Sauron's still around, but they don't want to admit that to her. Instead, they want to lie to her and send her off, because they make a line about how, in her strive to find him, she might bring about what she's trying.
She might have inadvertently kept alive the very evil she sought to defeat. Or the same wind that seeks to blow out a fire may also cause its spread.
Which, spoilers, she does that exact thing. Because when she's out in the ocean, she makes the decision to, you know what, I'm gonna swim back. Okay, alright, imagine you're on your way to Hawaii and you decide halfway, like, you know what, I want to go back home. I get it, elves have incredible stamina, but are you really expecting us to believe that someone's just going to jump off and like, well, 400-mile swim, let's go there, mate. But yeah, that's the first episode for Galadriel. Other things happen in the first episode. You're introduced to Arondir, I believe his name. That's the elf with Bromwyn in the Southlands, which is an area from where a bunch of humans used to fight for Morgoth. Morgoth being the original big bad that then Sauron was a lieutenant of, and now Sauron's the new big bad. Well, but like I said, all this stuff that you don't really know unless you have studied the lore or know the lore of the Silmarillion, things like that. Things that even Tolkien himself never published. A lot was published posthumously. But yes, so you're introduced to them. They obviously have some sort of relationship going on. She has a son who's found some weird evil hilt that's clearly Sauron's sword, and they find a blown up city, and that's it for them. And they're introduced to the Harfoots, which are basically hobbits, but they didn't have the rights to use hobbits. And they see a comet land that's clearly Gandalf, but it's not Gandalf because they're not allowed to use Gandalf. So since everyone says this is not Gandalf, I'm going to break the trend and say, no, this is not Saruman. So not Saruman lands, and that's essentially how the first episode ends. I'm pretty sure that hits everything. So literally nothing happens. Like, a lot happens, but nothing happens. That's the first episode. And I remember they dropped the first 2 episodes the same day, and I started watching it at 7 p.m. And me and my wife didn't finish watching the first 2 episodes until, I want to say, 2 a.m. And I don't know what happened. They dragged forever because it wasn't even like we knew some of these characters, but still it moved at a snail's pace, and it doesn't pick up in the second episode. Second episode, Galadriel's swimming in the ocean. Somehow she comes across a shipwrecked raft of people that has a dude on it that's clearly not Sauron, even though he is Sauron. Spoilers, once again, Halbrand is Sauron. And what on earth they are thinking, I don't know. Like, literally, this whole series, Halbrand is the reluctant hero. They're trying to paint him as the Aragorn type, only to then say he's Sauron. But you mean to tell me that we're supposed to be sympathetic for Sauron? He wasn't all bad. The reason why he decides to go bad and rebel is because Galadriel rejects him? Are you kidding me? Like, I don't know a lot about Tolkien, but one thing I do know is that they set the fantasy world as far as it's good versus evil. There's no shades of gray. You're very, very bad, or you're very, very evil. You can still be flawed. Isildur was flawed and kept the ring, but that's because he was being corrupted by the pure evil of the ring. Well, in this show, they really try and go that Game of Thrones modern, everything is gray, no one's truly bad, no one's truly evil, which, yeah, I get, that's the thing that goes away from the tropes that Tolkien set, but in a show that's supposed to be Tolkien-esque, why are you doing it? Like, this is my problem with prequels in general. There's no stakes in the show. We already know these characters. Like, spoilers once again, the season ends with Isildur allegedly being dead. Celeborn is dead, but if you know the Lord of the Rings, unless this is going off into an alternate timeline, which it might end up doing, these people are very, very alive in this series, as well as need to be alive for things to happen later on down the line. But getting ahead of myself. So yeah, she finds this raft of people that then gets attacked by a giant sea serpent, because I'll admit the sea serpent looked badass. Halbrand abandons the rest of the people to a watery grave, gets Galadriel for some reason. Why he's doing this, why he eventually saves her life in the episode, nobody knows, because it just makes sense for the plot. Because if he is Sauron and this is the woman who's been hunting him for hundreds of years, whatever. After this, we go to Arondir, which he gets captured, and then Bromwyn, back at the town in the Southlands, kills an orc, and maybe Theo does something, I don't know. Harfoots, you see Girl Frodo and Girl Sam meeting, not Saruman, and it's clear it's definitely not Gandalf, not Saruman. It uses his magic powers, and that happens with that, and after that, like, literally, what? That's it? That's what I mean. That's the whole... I'm legit... Oh, no. We meet the dwarves. And we meet Celebrimbor. So, Celebrimbor, the only person I know going into this damn series who's a badass... No, you get this guy who looks like he should have been on The Young and the Restless, or, it looks like the male Betty White. Like, this is Celebrimbor. This is the badass who created the rings. This guy... Oh my god, like, you thought Elrond was bad, but this guy takes the cake. So their whole thing is they need to build a forge. They're not even talking about the rings. The rings aren't even a thought yet. They need to build a forge. So they send him off to the mines of Moria, and you see Khazad Dûm. And you get there, and instead of Celebrimbor going in there, who his plan it was, Elrond's like, I got this, mate. I got this. So just leave Celebrimbor at the door, which, mind you, these places are supposed to be... a lot, like a big distance. It's not like you just walk down the street. So he's just like, oh well, and then he just fucks off and goes home. So that's it for Celebrimbor. And Elrond goes in there. He reconnects with his dwarf lover Durin IV, who makes him do a competition, which Elrond clearly throws, and then that's it. And then they end up having a bro moment and kind of make up, and then Elrond's like, oh, I guess I'll go home with my tail between my legs, because they need to find something. The elvish tree has rot, which is another thing they created for the show, and they need the dwarves to make a forge so that they can counteract this. And you don't know this at the time, but the dwarves have found some secret ore that is very obviously going to be mithril, because why wouldn't it be? And they open up a chest because they try and mystery box Lord of the Rings. Like, we already know who these people are. We already know what this is. Like, we don't need mithril to have it, like, which has an origin story, and it is mystery boxed in this episode. And that's it. That's it for the first 2 episodes. Have I said anything? To recap, Galadriel goes on a boat, jumps off a boat, runs into Sauron. Oh, and then they're found by another boat. Just so happens, like, this is the smallest ocean in the world. To find one swimmer finds a tiny raft, then finds a boat that's going to the land of Numenor, which Numenor essentially is a facsimile for Atlantis in Tolkien that then has a Sodom and Gomorrah type end. The Harfoots have met Gandalf, which the Harfoots, a roving band of people that have this motto where no one is left behind.
Nobody goes astray.
And nobody walks alone.
Until they fall behind, and at which point, sorry, you're dead. And they even like their punishment, because in this episode, not Gandalf or not Saruman messes up everything, and they don't like outsiders because they don't want people to know they exist for some reason. And so the Brandywines, which Girl Frodo comes from, and her dad had injured his foot, they get put at the back of the line of the caravan.
The Brandyfoot cart will be with us. At the back of the caravan.
At the back?
And essentially that's certain death, because if they fall behind, ain't no one coming back to help them.
Should any Harfoot fall behind, they likewise will be carried with us in our hearts and in our memories.
So yeah, the Harfoots are assholes. Arondir, the elf, is reunited with his elf people, which, by the way, they had ended the war, and they were no longer going to watch over the Southlanders. Well, now they are all captured. They're in this big tunnel structure with these orcs that... There was a lot of inconsistencies. Are the orcs allergic to sunlight? Are they not? Some episodes, they can't barely go anywhere in the sunlight. Some they can. In this one, they have the tunnel covered, but what the hell are they building? And it's just an excuse to get some cool prison break fight scenes going, but ultimately everyone's dead. Right as they're about to kill Arondir, they are introduced to this guy who cuts to the episode, because that's how they end every episode. They cut to the episode. At least in this episode, we get to meet Elendil and Isildur, characters we actually do know. We meet Miriam, who is the Queen Regent of Numenor, Farazad, who's kind of her number one in command. And we get the great line of, "The sea is always right."
The sea is always right.
It was the sea that put her in my path. And the sea is always right.
What are we here? We had the Greyjoys? The sea is always right. This is Elendil's reason for picking up an elf. And apparently the Numenorians hate elves. They even though the elves are the ones who set them up with this island and helped them, and also these are big warrior people like the Spartans of the Tolkien landscape, and yet they can't fight very well. I mean, Halbrand kicks the hell out of a bunch of them just randomly because he's trying to forge. You know, he's got this need to forge. He just has to get his hands on some steel, mate.
Telling you, there is not another man on this isle that knows this craft better than I.
So we get the sea is always right. We're met to Isildur, who's a loser. We get to meet Isildur's sister, which is another made-up character, but they have her. She's trying to be an architect with the Architects Guild, and she has a relationship with Farazad's son. And so basically Galadriel is trying to get them to help her go to Middle-earth, and Halbrand, I think, has mentioned that the orcs were on the move in the Southlands. And in this, we then get Galadriel riding a horse, which apparently they really wanted us to know she liked riding a horse, because you get the creepiest smile I've ever seen in a television show. Like, it was actually laugh out loud funny. Though with all the qualms, I have to say episode 3 at least was better. I mean, you go to the archives of Numenor, and she then realizes that the brand of Sauron is actually the land of is actually a mountain range. It's Mordor, although it's not called Mordor yet. It's still the Southlands. And they find some black text. It's just like, oh look, there's a black text here. No one ever noticed it. Thank God you came, Galadriel. And yeah, okay. So that's episode 3. I think I hit pretty much everything there. Prison break fails. Harfoots are boring. Like, this probably the Harfoots slowed down this episode so much, which generally happens. The pacing for this show is all up and down. Generally, I found the Arondir stuff, as much as some of it could be not nonsensical, at least it was watchable. The Harfoot things just get so boring. But episode 4, we then have Galadriel's big thing where she wants to get to Middle-earth.
What authority do you speak, elf? That of your people? Or are you a castaway, grasping for a handhold in a tempest?
There is a tempest in me. It swept me to this island for a reason.
We get the visions from the Palantir, where she sees the ocean crashing into Numenor. Spoilers, like I said, it's Atlantis. It's going underground at some point, underwater. And so she breaks in to meet the king, which is Muriel's father, who's on his deathbed, and he's saying how they had to change their ways. I don't know, blah, blah, blah. Basically, Queen Muriel's like, all right, we got to get you out of here, Galadriel. And Galadriel ends up in a prison cell at one point and breaks out in one of the most hilarious prison break scenes you'll ever see. There's like 5 dudes, and it almost looked like a Scooby-Doo cartoon. She comes out and is like, oh, and they're like, oh my god, oh god. Like this little 5'4" Galadriel knocks these 6-foot dudes all into the prison cell with one hand, and Halbrand's looking at the Farazad like, oh, I wouldn't touch that, man. You're gonna die. And so he tells her where she's going, which then gets him his crest where he can start forging, and then you'll see him forging in episode 5. There's no Harfoots in episode 4, which is already a big plus. You find Theo, which is Bronwyn's son, is going to the town to find supplies, because they've all gone to the tower now that Bronwyn told them that the orcs are coming, which for some reason Bronwyn is the one they decide to put in charge.
Who gave you the right to decide?
Everyone who decided to come to this tower, Waldrick, including you.
She was the town, essentially medic or herbalist or wisdom, and it's very clearly these people don't like elves.
Oh, let it go, knife is.
And it's also very clear that she is a big friend to the elf, since Theo probably is their son. You never really see his ears, or if not, she's definitely using him as a surrogate father. Why on earth are these people putting her in charge? Just for that alone. Doesn't matter. She's the only person we got there. She's the only character we have besides the old man who's like, you ever heard of Sauron, have you?
Have you heard of him, lad?
If you heard of Sauron.
So that's who we get as the leader. But her son goes to get his little hilt, and then the orcs show up at the last minute. The guy that was with him runs off, and you're like, oh, he's dead. No. Earlier in the episode, Adar, which is Benjen Stark from Game of Thrones, who's not Sauron, decides to let Arondir, the elf, go warn the people at the tower that we're coming for you. You can leave, or you can serve us, or you're gonna die. But his grand plan is to release him to give this message, and then the orcs then almost kill him because he goes and rescues Theo. So it's like, wow, if you're going to release this guy to give a message, you should tell your grunts to let him go and tell the message, because nearly kill the guy. And this is where we get the chase scene where Bronwyn runs in and they all reconnect, and Rondir catches an arrow in midair and fires it, which I don't have a problem with. That's very Legolas-like. That's fine. The elves always get these little cool slots. But then they get out of the forest and the sun rises, but they're just standing there when the orcs could have clearly peppered them full of arrows, but they have worse aim than stormtroopers. Anyways, so that's episode 4. The Queen Regent's like, no, we're not going to Middle Earth, and then the flowers of the white tree start falling, and they're like, oh no, we turn around, we have to go to Middle Earth, we gotta be friends to the elves. That's about it. That's honestly about it. Other stuff happens, I'm sure, but nothing of main importance. So episode 5. Oh my god, episode 5. So they've already decided they're going to Middle Earth, and yet we have an entire episode where they're prepping to go to Middle Earth. Isildur, who's gotten his friends kicked off of their boat riding apprenticeship, he's being told, no, you can't go. And then Galadriel is gonna go and teach the Spartan warriors how to fight, and gives the most condescending advice I've ever seen in my life.
There are many ways to kill an orc, but for you, I will keep it strong and simple. Stab, twist, gut.
Stab, twist, gut. Which they make a callback to in episode 6. You see, the first thing when one of the guys fights, who was the one that was fighting her, stab, twist, gut. Like, so, oh god, thank you guys. But then they have this choreographed fight scene where you always know people who don't know how to do fight choreography, they always think that a way to dodge a sword or a blow would be like, like, look how badass I am. Oh, you're not hitting me, I'm so badass. And she just has this one-on-one, 4-on-1, to eventually she's dual wielding a sword, and they have another one of these awkward, like, upward angles. She's like, Maria! She looks like she's, oh, it's so bad. It's just so bad. It's not believable at all. Like, it's hilarious, honestly. It's so bad, it's hilarious. Because she's such a legendary 5'4" sword fighter that only one of them barely manages to nick her arm in her twisting defense. Like, you realize no one's just going at you with a jab. You're gonna go slash, and immediately this, oh, and they're using real swords. You're not even using fake swords. What do you do when it gets lucky? You're like, oh, sorry, we just beheaded the commander of the Northern armies, the Scourge of the Orc, beheaded by a trainee. Yeah, that was bad. The Harfoots, unfortunately, are back. Not Saruman ends up protecting him, though, against some wolves, so then they like him. But then as he's going to heal his wound, for some reason, Girl Frodo decides to put her hand on his wound, which I haven't even mentioned. Not Saruman can't talk the entire series. Like, he can't talk. Like, he's slowly learning how to talk because he fell out of the sky. And so he's got his hand in this ice, and she stupidly puts her hand on it, and then it blows up, and then she's like, oh my god, what have you done to me? What are you doing? Let him heal himself. Have you not? Like... Anyways, yeah, so this stupid contrived things like that happen left and right. You have the Southlanders, Bronwyn gives a speech where she's trying to get all the guys to fight with her in the tower, and then the dude who's like, you ever heard of Sauron? Says, hey, you know what? When we fought for Morgoth, we lived. And everyone's like, yeah, that's right, we did live. Fuck this girl, let's go. And then half the people leave, and they go and they find Adar, who then tells them, welcome. And one of the guys says, you must be Sauron. Like, oh, hell no. Kill your friend. And that's his initiation, is he has to kill the dude. Okay. Okay, so, yeah. And at the end of the episode, finally, at the end, notice how I'm not saying anything here. At the end of the episode, they have the Numenorians finally leaving Numenor on 3 ships, and Isildur gets on, and they have everyone getting on the ships, and then finally Galadriel comes on with her in her armor again, looking all epic, and all the guys are like, oh my gosh, Galadriel, oh how, we are not worthy. Okay. I mean, after she had such excellent fight choreography, of course. So they're all on the ship because, there's another contrivance where they try and blow up the Numenorian fleet, which they end up blowing up 2 of the ships, where Isildur happens to be out there and rescues him because girl Isildur, his sister, tries to tell Pharazon's son to sabotage. Anyway, it doesn't matter. They're going. They leave. So episode 6 is the big fight. I forgot. The dwarfs show up again. This is the point where it's because it's so boring. Literally, the whole dwarf Elrond storyline is, you got the mithril. Yes, I need the mithril. Can we have the mithril? No, you can have the mithril. We really need the mithril. Oh, I need the mithril. And it's, give me the meat and give it to me raw. That's this episode. That's where this comes from.
Give me the meat and give it to me raw.
And they have a scene where Durin meets Gil-galad and says this thing about the table they're using, which is a really, a pristine table in their land. It's actually a nice scene. It's nice to put some of the lore and the history and some of that reverence for Tolkien type things.
We reserve its use for the most sacred purposes.
And then later, he's like, my wife wanted a new table.
Disa's been wanting a new table for years, so.
And the shit's all over it. Like, that's kind of how this whole thing is you say something and then later it's like, yeah, I didn't mean that. Okay. And you have this part where Elrond's like, oh, I know about the mithril, but I can't tell you about the mithril.
Then you admit the dwarves did find it, the ore containing the light of the lost Silmaril.
I admit only this. I promised Durin never to reveal his people's secrets.
Are you sure you can't tell us about the mithril? No, I cannot break my oath. I gave my oath, so obviously if I tell you, I'll have broken my oath. But I know it's there, but I can't break my oath.
Did the dwarves find the ore or not?
I swore an oath.
You've already said that you've broken your oath. By your behavior. It doesn't even, you don't have, if I go and say like, oh, hon, I bought a $1,000 TV, but there's a TV in the corner there, and I'm just like, don't look at the TV. How much did you spend on that? Oh, I didn't buy that TV. Like, no, I mean, it's not a great analogy, but still, the whole time where he's talking about, I can't tell you. It's like, I know a secret, but I can't tell you. So did they have that ore? Oh, I can't tell you if it exists. I made a promise. Okay, so clearly you know it exists. You just can't say it exists. So blink once if yes, blink twice if no, blink 3 times if I can kill myself. I wish I could blink 3 times. So back to episode 6. It's a big battle scene. So they set it up where they have this tower defense. It's very much supposed to be Helm's Deep again. And they immediately destroy the tower in a pretty cool sequence, I will admit. You think it kills all the orcs, but it really just slows them down. And then they decide to go to the fortification of the town with the thatched roofs that can be burned. And they have a keep that literally, you could just burn it like the freaking place in Game of Thrones where all the cows are. Like, what are you thinking? You have a rock structure and you don't even kill everyone. But whatever. You have this. They start the episode. Galadriel, with her keen eyesight, is seeing land, and then Isildur's talking to her about how, oh, she's so magical. And Elendil shows up wearing the most dad bod armor I've ever seen in my life. Like, this was $1 billion show and they couldn't make the armor look better. Like, it literally looked like dad bod armor, which was so funny. So funny. They get there just in time. There's a big battle sequence that then leads to another battle sequence. Bronwyn saves the day, and then you think Arundir's gonna die. Bronwyn saves him. Then Bronwyn gets shot with 2 arrows, but then it's just 1 arrow. They cauterize the wound. She's dead. She's not dead. Theo gives the hilt. They wrap up the hilt. The Numenorians show up. Galadriel has another ridiculous action sequence where she does a side hold on her frickin' horse and then gibbs a dude with literally like a flick of the wrist, and the guy's head explodes, body explodes. Like, it's not believable at all. And then you get a chase sequence where They take the package, so it's wrapped, the hilt. The hilt's very important. Adar, Benjen Stark, runs off with it. Galadriel runs after him, and then somehow, because he's Sauron teleports in front of him, captures him, almost kills him. The guy asks him, "Who are you?" They pick up the package. They don't check to see what it is. The package goes to Galadriel, which then Galadriel hands it to Arondir, and then Arondir gives it back to Theo. In this entire time, no one opens it to verify that the damn hilt is there, because it's convenient not to be. And finally, once Theo opens it, it's a hatchet, and then cut to, you heard of Sauron, have you? Who somehow managed to forge a sword with it? Like a big sword, and he sticks it in the point in the tower, which in the last episode, I didn't even talk about this. They show the sword hilt to Arondir, and Arondir's like, wait, I've seen this sword hilt before. And literally, like, opening up my blinds, he pulls some weeds out of the way, and there's the sword hilt. So anyways, that's where the guy is. He sticks the sword hilt in the tower. It somehow makes a dam crash, and then that big trench that had been digging all through episode 3 is now apparently right up to the tower and leads all the way to a mountain, which puts all this water into the mountain's volcano, causes the volcano to erupt, causing Mount Doom. We got a Mount Doom origin story, just like we got a Mithril origin story in the last episode. Which how the hell these elves with these keen eyes where they can see landfall when you can't even see anything but water on the horizon, but you cannot see a giant trench with tarps over it coming right up to your tower? Doesn't matter. So that happens. I mean, you can't open up a package to verify a hilt, so I guess they're not verifying what that foliage looks like and all those people and sound of rocks being dug. So yeah, so that causes Mount Doom, but even more hilariously, a pyroclastic flow comes, and Galadriel, who now suddenly, after this, becomes much more humble than she was earlier in the series, just gets hit to the dome with it. Everyone, like, it just hits her straight in the face. We already know she's not dead, but are you kidding me? Like, is it? I know why. If you remember in episode 1, it's so evil it cannot burn hot.
This place is so evil, our torches give off no warmth.
That must be the reason. But then in episode 7, it starts off and people have been frickin' Pompeyed and are burning and dying and things are on fire, and yet Galadriel is just fine, even though she just took a pyroclastic flow to the face. So, who knows? For some reason, she runs into Theo, and then they wander off through the woods all episode, and everyone else seems to get together. This is where Isildur dies. Muriel loses her eyes, and they have a callback with the majestic horse running off into the sunset looking for Isildur, because earlier in the last episode he had a moment with his dad where his dad was telling him about how, "Oh, Isildur, your mother taught me everything I knew." But, you know, he wasn't able to pass on his horse whispery. And just spends the whole episode crying. Like Elendil the Tall, the guy who has the Narsil, the one that Sauron kills right before Isildur picks up his sword and cuts off the ring, spends the entire episode crying, which you'll see in this episode more than any. I think there's no less than 3 or 4 men crying and all the women just looking stoic. Like, I don't think a single woman in this whole series cries, but you got a lot of dude tears, a lot of single man tears, and ugly man tears. So there you go. So they wander off. They have a callback to Fellowship where these orcs are going to find him, but they can't. He says he only smells ash, so yet even more speculation to Theo being part elf because he can't smell them. Oh, there's also these 3 mage ladies that showed up that are looking for not Saruman, and they're from the east, and that's it. That's it. They're looking for him. And in this point, Gandalf, not Saruman, heals this area that they got to because one of the things from Mount Doom now hit it and caught it on fire. So he then heals everything, but when he does it, once again, female Frodo like knocks over her sister into the realm of danger to where a tree falls over and nearly kills both of them. And they keep doing this. Like, let the man do his magic. Stop interfering because you make it so much worse. And so he gets exiled, but then everything grows and it looks like the Shire. But then the 3 mage women, whatever they are, like the all female kind of, they get there and the Harfoots try to attack them, and then they put the fire out with her hand and then set everything ablaze. So it's almost like, there you go, you assholes. That's what you get for abandoning people. It's supposed to be the scouring of the Shire, but I just found it more funny than anything. Everyone reconvenes in some area that somehow is outside of Mount Doom and has no remnants whatsoever of the ash in the air. And this is when you find out Bronwyn's alive, Arondir's alive. Everyone gets reconnected. Not that you had any doubts. And then you see Halbrand, who, by the way, in the last episode had been like, oh, you're the king of the Southlands, because he had this little pouch with him that Galadriel saw, and is like, oh, that means you're the king of the Southlands. And so they introduce him to Bronwyn, who's like, you're the king who's promised.
Is it true? Are you the king we were promised?
And yes, the king, oh, hail to the king, king of the north, king of the Southlands. But he's been mortally wounded, so he needs elvish medicine. So then he's on his deathbed, but then suddenly he's able to get on a horse and then ride on out. And that's the end of it. Literally, this is episode 7. Now we're getting to episode 8. Still nothing about rings at all. And I think we also have at the end of this episode, Durin is told by his dad, you've been excommunicated for going for the Mithril, because once again, they decided to dig for the Mithril, and it's him and Elrond, and they find this giant cavity of Mithril, and then at the bottom of it is the Balrog. Remember the Balrog? That's all you see of it. No payoff. Next, come back in 2 years when the next season comes out. And then episode 8. Episode 8. All right. Oh, and also they say, oh, the Southlands. What shall we call this land?
What shall we call it instead, Lord Father?
And then it does almost like a thing I do in my videos, where I do a fade of the font of the Southlands and then put Mordor. Like, really? This is a $1 billion show? That's how you're gonna announce it's Mordor? You don't even have Adar going like, I shall call it Mordor. No, it just says Mordor. So episode 8, we have the Harfoots again. Now there actually is a decent sequence where not Saruman has a fight scene with the 3 female mages, and the Harfoots show up, and unfortunately the main Harfoot gets stabbed with a knife, and then Saruman, who at the beginning they call him Sauron, so they try and trick you one more time, like, oh, he was Sauron, he's not Gandalf, he's not Sauron, he's Sauron. He's obviously not Sauron. And then they start controlling him. There's a bunch of callbacks of the fight with Saruman where he's being twisted in the air. And then he basically gets one of their staffs from female Frodo and destroys them all. Which is a pretty cool scene. I enjoyed that scene. Elendil suddenly now is, even though his son is dead, and you never find out, although he's not dead because he's the one who cuts the ring, he's back in Numenor now with Miriel, when they're clearly trying to set them up as a possible couple. And now he says about how he's friends of elves again, and even though in the last episode he was saying, curse the day I saved that woman, now he's like back on board. And they show this one clip of Pharazôn talking about how tragic it is the king died, because, by the way, Muriel's father had passed by this point, which before that, Gerl Isildur, who was one of the architects, for some reason because he was on his deathbed, how conveniently, all the architect apprentices were given an hour with the king to do his visage, his likeness, and while this, he wakes up and suddenly takes her for Miriel because the resemblance is striking, opens up the area to where the Palantir is, and she pulls the thing away, and then that's it. No payoff. We don't see what happens. Ever. I mean, tune in 2 years from now. And then Pharazôn talks about how cruel it is that people die.
It will be our duty to forge for him a tomb, granting him the immortality in stone that no man, not even a king, can attain in life.
I didn't even know this, but looking into it, the whole reason why Numenor falls is because these people go and they try and steal immortality from the Valar or whatever. And so it's one of those things where they affront to God, and that's why they're destroyed. So this scene is supposed to hint at that. Which, if you don't know, you don't know. Which is another reason why, who is this show for? Because they use obscure references of the lore, but they aren't actually being honest to the lore because they're changing it fast and loud. And then Galadriel takes Halbrand to the place of the elves where he gets healed, and then Celebrimbor and Elrond are trying to make something with the Mithril, because in the last episode they discovered Mithril kills the rot that's on the leaves. And then suddenly Halbrand just starts acting suspicious as fuck.
This is a peculiar ore. What is it?
Hey, Celebrimbor, the master forger, have you thought about mixing in another alloy? Oh, I never thought of that. Thank you. And suddenly, because Celebrimbor says this thing about how the ring, not the rings, the crown, because they're not sure, it has to be a circular thing. Like, oh, it's going to be a ring, not telling us it's a ring.
We are on the cusp of crafting a new kind of power. Not of strength,
but of spirit. Not of the flesh, but over flesh.
So she starts being suspicious of Halbrand, sends one of the elven dudes to go and look in the archives, discovers that there are no Southland Kings line. It's been dead for 1,000 years, which you think they would have known of this. And then suddenly Halbrand admits he's Sauron, says, oh, join me, you will be a queen. Uses the same thing Galadriel uses when she's tempting the ring with her.
I would make you a queen. Fair as the sea and the sun. Stronger than the foundations of the earth.
And then leaves her. Elrond finds her. And then instead of telling Elrond that, oh, Sauron is here, it just says, oh yeah, let's continue making the thing that Sauron suggested. But let's make 3 so that I can get one. And yeah, the rest of the episode is them forging the damn ring. And they have to burn her gold and silver dagger that means so much to her from her brother to make it with the metal. Even though when they come out, it's clear 2 of the rings had gold, one of them had silver. How the hell did the metal separated? It's because it's the purest alloy, like all these reasons. And then Elrond gets suspicious, finds the scroll, and then he probably realizes that Halbrand was Sauron too, but no one says anything. And that's it. And that's it. And that's the end of a $1 billion show. And I'm exhausted. I hope I saved you some time. I don't know what I'm going to do with this, but yeah. Great show. Great show. All right, it's been so nice getting a hold of you guys. Take care.